So imagine this, you get married to a man, but he ends up sleeping with half of his staff. He is cheating on you, he's absent from the house, you guys end up divorcing, and you stay alone for a year. After this, you take out a will that he is not included on, and a few months later, he comes back into your life, sweeps you off your feet, and you guys get remarried, and 12 days later, you're dead. And this man gets everything. And somehow your own death was blamed on you. This is what happened for Elsa Limp-Wright back in the 1920s. And not only her, but 3 other members of her family died in the same manner. But Elsa's is by far the most suspicious. So let's get into her backstory and then talk about some of the red flags. Elsa was born in 1883, and she was the last of the Limp children. The family that she was born into was the famous Limp brewing family of St. Louis. Like I'm telling y'all, these guys made bank. But Elsa was always the baby of the family. And while she was very spoiled, she became an independent, resilient young woman. So how did Elsa end up the most wealthiest unmarried woman in St. Louis at the time? Well, she was only 23 when her mother passed away of cancer in 1906. So their family's entire estate was divided among the children when she passed away. And it was said on the will that Elsa could receive an extra $100,000 whenever she married. Well, Elsa was a baddie and a feminist, and she joined the suffrage movement in the 1910s and became the founder of the first suffragette society in St. Louis. She was fascinated with spiritualism and just an overall free thinker. Well, she ended up meeting a man named Thomas Wright. He was the president of this brass and metal company, so the wedding was bougie and they took a year-long honeymoon, essentially traveling the world. And Elsa brought 28 pieces of Louis Vuitton luggage with her. But once they got back home and reality set in, their personalities did not mix well together and it turned into a freaking storm. They had screaming matches that often turned violent. He would cheat on her constantly. For one of the many examples, whenever he caught her in bed with one of his workers, she took her car and rammed it into his. On February 1st of 1919, Elsa filed for divorce. And it was granted. And for the next year, Elsa decided to find herself again. She was traveling, spending time with friends, family, but at some point reconnected with Thomas. This man somehow won her back, and on March 8th of 1920, they were remarried in New York City. And just a few days later, on March 20th, she was found dead. While her last days remain a mystery, the only version of events that exists belongs to her husband, who is highly suspicious. Either way, according to him, the night of March 19th was restless for Elsa. She was having indigestion, nausea, and periods of severe depression. It was thought that maybe she was having stress after remarrying Thomas, possibly having second thoughts about the reconciliation. Whatever was causing her suffering, she was awake for most of the night. Thomas claimed that she woke the next morning and was feeling better, but wanted to remain in bed. Let's talk about some of the red flags involving Elsa's death. There was no witnesses, and none of the workers there heard anything. They were shocked that there was no letter or note left. The first phone call was made to a doctor, and the second call was made to a family friend who just happened to be an attorney. No one bothered to telephone the police. In fact, the police found out by accident, because her brother Edwin ended up getting into a car accident after being called by the doctor. The police were dispatched over there, and Thomas seemed highly agitated. His only excuse for not calling them himself was that he was upset and bewildered. He was questioned for about 2 hours, but never taken into custody. While there's a large family history of depression, there was no real evidence to show that she took her own life. The only witness to this was her husband, who had claimed to hear a cracking sound. There was no blood at the crime scene, and her body wasn't moved from the house following her death. The embalming was performed in-room. I am on my way to the Limp Mansion right now, and I'm going to be staying in Elsa's room. The Limp Mansion has high paranormal activity. Imagine finding someone who's not only living in your house, but also planning to perform surgery on you. There has been so many terrifying cases of frogging, and if you don't know what frogging is, it's the act of an intruder living inside your home. Lifetime is coming out with a series that is filled with cases of frogging, which I totally recommend that you guys watch. But I want to start with a frogging case that gives me the absolute chills. This is called The Secret Surgeon. So this newlywed couple, James and Brittany Campbell, decided to move with their 2 kids to Honolulu, Hawaii after getting married in Vegas. They moved to the suburbs together and are thrilled to be starting their new lives. It's super important to note that above the bathroom at their new house, there was a crawl-space attic. Well, June of 2019 is when it all began. Brittany liked to watch makeup tutorials on YouTube as she would get ready and do her makeup and hair in the morning. And while she was doing this one day, she heard the front door slam just out of nowhere. And all throughout that evening, she continued to hear the door open and close. She had asked James if he had locked the door, and he had said yes, but she still made him go downstairs and check, and he found the door unlocked. This caused a bit of an argument between the newlyweds, and she found herself starting to get more and more obsessive about checking the locks and making sure everything was safe at night. She said that she felt like she was going crazy, and James was pretty dismissive about the whole thing. Oh, James. But Brittany was fixated on this. Well, eventually one day while James was playing the piano at the house, he sees a shadow of a person walk past him. But James was like, maybe this is just someone being nosy outside. Well, a few days later, James was at home with the kids, and he noticed that there was a strange message for him left on his desktop calendar, which stated, "Do as I did, choose a home, clean it, set up all devices." This story gets way scarier. James saw this really strange rehabilitation message on his calendar, but he thought it was just a strange way that Brittany was trying to tell him that he needed to tidy up. Well, 3 weeks later, James was finally convinced. They were all going to the movies as a family, and there was one particular blanket that they liked to use to snuggle up to watch movies, and none of them could find it. They searched the house up and down. It was usually on the couch. The kids were helping. No one could find it. And the second that they returned home from that movie, they found that blanket folded up perfectly, sitting on the couch. And that's when James knew something was wrong. Brittany was like, finally, she was feeling validated. And soon after that, in the middle of the night, Brittany noticed that her webcam was on, and she thought that that was strange, but she just got up and turned it off. So in September of 2019, they decided to go back and visit their family on the mainland, and they decided to take an earlier than planned flight home. And when they pulled up back to the house, they noticed that James's road bike was sitting in the driveway, and he was like, I didn't leave that out there. So they knew something was totally off, and the second that they opened their garage door, they noticed that everything was trashed. James was scared for his family's safety, so he went ahead and grabbed a sledgehammer and headed to the front door of the house. James tried to open his front door, but was met with some resistance. And then after providing a little bit of extra force with opening the door, he was met eye to eye with a man inside of his home. And this man was, no joke, plotting their surgery. James is eventually able to pull the intruder onto his front lawn. He notices that he's wearing his clothes, and the intruder is very calm, but trying to explain that this is his house. James is just trying to rationalize this. Maybe he's homeless, maybe he's on drugs. He's trying to call the police without causing a huge scene and just keep the man calm. Well, Brittany immediately runs into the home to go check on the cat. And on her way in, the man yells at her saying, "Don't worry, I've been taking care of your cat." And when she walks inside the house, she notices that all of her husband's instruments are out and everything looks like it's been taken inventory of. The cat was in a crate, it had no water, and it looked like he had been trying to feed the cat dried apricots. And a weird thing is that he kept the boys' room very pristine. That was the only clean room in the house. And their bedroom had a set of knives laid out on a towel. The weirdest part was that there was an old computer that they didn't use anymore set out on the bed. On it was a medical manifesto written by the intruder called The Omnivore Trials of Rehabilitation for Rat-Like People. And the journal itself had very intimate details about each family member. This is whenever they knew that he had in fact been stalking them for quite a while in their home. Looking at the journal and his prior search histories on the laptop, he had a whole outline on what he was going to do, how he was going to drug the family members. He had a serum sitting in the kitchen that was labeled to use on the omnivores. He referred to the family as being subhuman or a different species. Some of his Google searches included where to buy medical tables, how to perform surgeries at home, videos on how to surgically remove an arm, and videos on sex reassignment surgery. And he had left Brittany his own makeup tutorial on her laptop. That was why her webcam was on. He was arrested, put in jail, but then was granted supervised release. He then burglarized a Buddhist temple and was sent back to jail. He ended up killing his cellmate. I mean, this case is just way too much of a close call for me, and there are so many other terrifying cases of frogging.